It was the night everything changed. The night I discovered the truth no one wanted me to see. Up until that moment, I believed my life was secure, calm, predictable, and built on the trust I had in the people around me. But trust, I would soon learn, is fragile, and once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. For years, I had trusted my mentors, someone who had been a guiding force in my life, shaping my career and my perspective on the world. They were the rock I leaned on when the path ahead seemed uncertain, the person whose advice I sought in every decision. I believed in them without hesitation. They had been my mentor, my ally, my safe place. Everything I knew was based on this bond. I was secure, confident, and trusted that the foundation of my life was unshakable. But that night, I realized I had been wrong. That night, everything I had come to believe about trust was called into question. I couldn't quite place when the shift had happened. It wasn't a single moment. It was more like a slow, creeping fog that slowly started to blur the lines between what I knew and what I feared. One day, I realized that I no longer felt the same trust I had once felt. Something had changed. Something had changed. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable once I started paying attention. At first, I ignored it. It was just a feeling, I told myself. A fleeting doubt, maybe nothing more than stress or overthinking. But as days passed, I started noticing things that didn't add up. A comment here, a gesture there, things that didn't quite align with what I expected. And the more I tried to ignore them, the more they kept coming back, nagging at me, pulling me into a world I wasn't sure I wanted to see. The first sign was small, a comment I didn't fully understand at the time, but it lingered. Something in the tone of their voice, the way they said it. It didn't sit right with me. I brushed it off as nothing after all. Who would doubt someone who had always been there for them? But as the days went by, I couldn't shake it. I began to wonder, what if there was something more to it? What if my mentor wasn't the person I thought they were? What if everything I had built my trust on was a lie? And so, I started to ask myself a question I never thought I'd ask. What would I do if the person I trusted most turned out to be my greatest enemy? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to face the possibility that someone I admired and trusted could betray me. But the truth, however painful it was slowly becoming undeniable. I had to confront it. And as I did, I realized that trust is fragile. It can be built in an instant, but it can also be destroyed just as quickly. And once it's broken, there's no turning back. This is my story. A journey of betrayal, a quest for truth, and the painful realization that trust, once shattered, leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew. And I want to share it with you. Because, deep down, I know that if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever trusted someone only to have that trust broken, then this story is yours too. Chapter 1. I used to believe that trust was the strongest foundation a person could build their life on. It was the cornerstone of every relationship I held dear, the steady rhythm of my professional life, my personal life, and, most importantly, my relationship with my mentor. To me, trust was something simple and pure, something that didn't need to be questioned. After all, the people I had surrounded myself with had always been solid, reliable, and unchanging, and in that trust, I had built my world. I had found security in the guidance my mentor had offered me, and for years, their advice had shaped everything I did. They were my anchor, the person I turned to when I felt lost or unsure. With them, I never questioned the way forward. I followed their guidance without hesitation, believing they had my best interests at heart. Life was good, predictable. The routine of my work, the challenges I faced, and the reassurance of their support made me feel safe. I had no reason to doubt the foundation I had so carefully constructed. My mentor's approval was everything. They were a trusted advisor, a figure who had been there for me from the start. I was secure in this relationship, secure in the belief that they would always have my back. But then, one conversation changed everything. It happened one afternoon, as we were discussing a project that had consumed my thoughts for weeks. I had poured hours into it, every ounce of my focus and energy invested in its success. I was confident, eager for feedback. I had spent so long thinking this through, believing this would be the breakthrough I had been waiting for. As I laid out the details, my mentor sat there listening, nodding occasionally, their expression unreadable. I expected their usual encouraging response, the feedback that had always spurred me on to do better. But instead, something shifted in the air, something subtle that I couldn't put my finger on. When I finished, I awaited the kind of response. I had grown accustomed to the one that would affirm my efforts, the one that would tell me I was on the right track. But instead, I was met with a brief, almost dismissive remark. "That sounds fine," they said, their voice distant, almost distracted, "but don't overcomplicate it." I was taken aback. It was so unlike them, so unlike the mentor I had come to trust. My stomach churned. They didn't seem engaged, not the way they usually were. They didn't ask questions, didn't offer any constructive criticism. Just a few words, and then silence. For a moment, I stood there, unsure of how to react. My mind raced. Did I misinterpret their response? Did I expect too much? But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, something didn't sit right. The distance in their voice, the lack of interest, it felt like a slight, an inexplicable shift in our relationship. Something I couldn't understand, something I couldn't ignore. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried to continue my work, to focus on the tasks ahead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The words they had said echoed in my mind. Don't overcomplicate it. But what did that even mean? I had spent countless hours on this project, considering every angle, trying to make it perfect, and yet, it was dismissed so easily. Why? The unease continued to creep in, and it only grew stronger as the days went by. I began to notice other small signs, subtle shifts in the way they spoke to me, moments of detachment that hadn't been there before. At first, I dismissed them as nothing more than stress or the weight of their responsibilities. But the more I reflected on them, the more they didn't add up. This wasn't like the mentor I had always known. This wasn't the person who had been my guide, my trusted advisor. They were becoming someone else, someone I couldn't recognize. And in that recognition, I began to question everything. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty. I found myself replaying every conversation, every interaction, in my mind. Each moment I had spent with my mentor now felt tainted by doubt. Had I missed something? Had I been wrong to trust them so completely? I thought of all the times I had sought their approval, how I had looked to them for direction and reassurance, and now I felt like I was standing on shaky ground, unsure of where I stood. I still wanted to believe that my mentor had my best interests at heart. I didn't want to believe that the person I trusted the most had somehow become someone I couldn't trust, but the evidence was there, in the small signs, the way they had dismissed my project, the way they had been distant and distracted, the way I now felt like I was no longer a priority. I tried to ignore it, to push it out of my mind, but the doubt only festered. It gnawed at me in every interaction. Was I overthinking things? Was I imagining the distance between us? I didn't know the answers, but I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. Deep down, I knew something had changed, but I wasn't ready to face the truth. At this point, I began to wonder, was I overreacting? Was my mind clouded by insecurities? Or was something deeper happening here? Could the person I had trusted more than anyone else really be betraying me, even if it was only in small, quiet ways? The days that followed felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened with tension. Every time I spoke to my mentor, I could feel the distance between us growing wider, even though nothing was said outright. It was the silence, the quiet absence of the reassurance I once took for granted. I wanted to ask, to confront them about the change I sensed, but fear held me back. I couldn't bring myself to break the fragile surface of our relationship, afraid of what might be revealed beneath it. And then, it happened again. We had a meeting scheduled to discuss my progress on the project I had been working on so intensely. I had hoped that, in this meeting, I would receive the kind of feedback I was used to, something that would either reassure me or push me further. I had been preparing for this, anticipating the approval or constructive criticism that would allow me to move forward. But when the time came, my mentor barely even looked at my work. Their gaze kept drifting, distracted by something I couldn't see. It wasn't the kind of focused attention I was accustomed to. When they finally spoke, their words felt detached, almost cold. "You're doing fine," they said, barely glancing at the documents in front of them. "But you should consider changing a few things. Don't get too attached to one idea. It's a bit ... rigid." The dismissal hung in the air between us like a cloud of ice. I tried to mask the sting of disappointment. I had expected guidance, or at least a thoughtful critique that might help me improve. But instead, I was met with an indifferent comment. That made me question everything I had poured into the project. I wanted to protest, to explain why I had approached it this way, but the words caught in my throat. The more I thought about it, the more the layers of doubt began to pile up. This wasn't just a change in tone. It was something deeper, something that went beyond the surface level of our professional relationship. I felt a creeping sense of betrayal, as though I had been dismissed in a way I had never been before. I spent the rest of the day in a fog of confusion. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal, that maybe I was just being overly sensitive. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to analyze the situation from every angle. Was I misinterpreting their behavior, or was it really as bad as it felt? Every time I revisited the moment, I felt like I was seeing the cracks in our relationship more clearly. This wasn't just a small disagreement or a momentary lapse. It was the beginning of something more, a subtle shift that, in hindsight, I should have seen coming. Every time I tried to ignore it, to move past it, the feeling of betrayal kept resurfacing, growing stronger. That night, I decided I had to confront it. I couldn't go on pretending that everything was fine. I had to know the truth, even if it meant facing the discomfort of questioning my mentor. But the more I thought about how to approach them, the more I realized how vulnerable that would make me. To ask them about this, to confront them with the possibility that my trust had been broken, felt like standing at the edge of a precipice. I wasn't sure if I could handle the fall if I took that leap, but I also knew that if I didn't ask, if I didn't confront the doubts that were creeping in, I would never be able to move forward. Trust had been the foundation of everything I had built, and now, that foundation was cracking. But what if I was wrong? What if it was just my imagination? What if I was reading too much into it? Maybe I'm just overthinking things, I told myself. After all, my mentor had always been the one to guide me, to show me the right way. Maybe it was just a rough patch. People change, right? Maybe this wasn't a betrayal at all. Maybe I was just projecting my fears onto them. As the days passed, I couldn't shake those questions. The more I thought about it, the more I felt torn. I wanted to believe that I was wrong, that I was just being paranoid. But with every passing interaction, with every piece of cold advice, my confidence in them began to slip. And with that, the walls I had built around myself began to weaken. The cracks continued to grow. Even though I tried to pretend everything was fine, I wanted to confront my mentor, but fear held me back. Fear of what the truth might reveal. What if I was wrong? What if confronting them would only destroy everything? What would be left if the person I trusted most turned out to be the one who had betrayed me? I felt more alone than I had ever felt. Doubt settled in my chest, and with it came a bitter realization. Trust, once broken, is never truly whole again. And once you see the cracks, you can never unsee them. The next time we met, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to confront the truth. I couldn't live with this nagging feeling anymore. I had to ask, even if it meant facing the possibility that everything I had built, everything I had trusted, was built on a lie. Chapter 2. The days after my mentor's dismissive comment and the emotional distance that had grown between us were filled with a sense of confusion. I kept telling myself that it was nothing, that I was overthinking it. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was wrong. I was constantly questioning my perception of events, my trust, my judgment, and even the relationship I had always thought was unbreakable. I tried to go about my days as usual, putting on the facade that everything was fine. I smiled, I answered emails, I met deadlines, but in the back of my mind, the doubts lingered. Every conversation with my mentor felt more strained, less genuine. I noticed the subtle signs, the small shifts in their behavior that I couldn't quite ignore. The once warm smiles had become colder. The supportive comments turned into brief, almost dismissive remarks. And it wasn't just the tone, it was the way they avoided eye contact, how their words didn't match their actions. I had hoped it was just a rough patch. People go through phases, right? Maybe they were under stress. Maybe it had nothing to do with me at all. But with each interaction, the distance between us felt like a chasm. I couldn't help but wonder if the person I had trusted for so long had changed, or if I was just seeing the truth for the first time. The tipping point came during a meeting where I presented a new idea I had been working on. I was excited finally, a project that could push the boundaries of what we'd been doing. I explained it with enthusiasm, hoping to get a positive response. But instead of the validation I expected, my mentor barely glanced at the proposal. They were distracted, their gaze wandering as I spoke. When they finally responded, their voice was distant, almost indifferent. It's fine, they said. But it's not really a priority. We can revisit this later. That was it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being brushed off. I wasn't worth their time anymore. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they were delivered. The lack of interest. The lack of care. This wasn't the mentor I had known. This wasn't the person who had helped me build my career, who had been my sounding board and my guide. I couldn't get the words out of my head. We can revisit this later. Later, what had changed? What had happened to the mentor who would have listened to every detail, given constructive feedback, and offered support? Now, it felt like I was just another task on their long list, one that could be put off or dismissed without a second thought. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I could look back and see the little signs, the distractions, the unspoken words, the subtle changes in behavior. But at the time, I had brushed them off. I had chosen to ignore the discomfort because I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that the person I trusted so deeply was capable of undermining me, of belittling my efforts. But as I sat there, staring at my proposal, I realized that I had been seeing it all along, just not acknowledging it. The doubt, the discomfort, the feeling of being dismissed, it had always been there, just under the surface. And now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I left the meeting that day feeling hollow. The excitement I had felt about the project evaporated, replaced by a gnawing sense of betrayal. I had worked hard, put my heart into it, and my mentor had simply brushed it aside. It wasn't just about the project, it was about the relationship between us. And now, I was beginning to question everything I had built with them. I couldn't escape the thoughts. Were they right? Was I overreacting? Or was I just seeing the cracks in our relationship for what they really were? The more I thought about it, the more the reality hit me. My mentor had changed, and the person they had become was no longer the person I had trusted. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it all. Could I really confront them? Could I ask the questions that were burning inside me? What if they denied everything? What if I was just imagining things? The fear of being wrong, of misjudging the situation, kept me in a state of paralysis. But the other part of me, the part that knew something was wrong, refused to back down. I had to find out the truth. But what was the truth? What if I was wrong? What if this was just a phase, something that would pass with time? I didn't want to lose my mentor. I didn't want to lose the person who had shaped my career and my life. But how could I ignore what I was seeing? How could I continue to pretend that everything was fine when I felt the trust between us slipping away? It was in that moment, sitting at my desk, staring at the proposal I had worked on, that I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a project or a dismissive comment. This was about trust, the foundation of our entire relationship, and I was beginning to realize that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, that my mentor still saw me as they once did. The doubt had planted itself too deep, and now it was growing roots. I had to confront it. I had to confront them. I couldn't go on like this, living in the uncertainty, trapped by my own fear of facing the truth. But when the moment came, when I finally had the courage to ask, I couldn't help but wonder, how far can I trust someone when I've already seen the cracks in their mask? How much longer could I hold on to the belief that they were the person I once thought they were? The truth was becoming clearer with each passing day, but it was a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. What if the person I had trusted most turned out to be the one who could hurt me the most? That thought haunted me, lingering like a shadow, refusing to be ignored. And yet, the other side of me, the side that had learned to trust, to believe in the goodness of others, was still clinging to the hope that I was wrong. But as the distance between us grew, and the small betrayals began to add up, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't continue living in this state of uncertainty. I had to know. I had to find out what was real. Chapter 3. The confrontation with my mentor didn't go the way I had hoped. It didn't even come close to the catharsis I had imagined. The moment I had built up in my head, the one where I would finally demand answers, was nothing like what I expected. I had held on to the hope, the faint belief that maybe, just maybe, I had misunderstood everything. But after seeing the email, the truth I had been trying to avoid was right in front of me. I couldn't pretend any longer, so I confronted them. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I had to know what was real. But the response I received, the way they handled my questions, felt almost worse than the betrayal itself. When I asked, "Why didn't you tell me about the new plan? Why didn't you involve me?" their reaction was calm, almost too calm. "Look," they began, their tone neutral, but their eyes cold. "This is how it had to be done. We needed a new direction. I didn't think you'd be ready to accept it yet. Sometimes, you have to make hard decisions that others might not understand." I felt the weight of their words, but they didn't hit me like I thought they would. They felt hollow, empty, as if they were trying to cover something up rather than explain themselves. They weren't apologizing, they weren't even acknowledging the betrayal. It was like I was talking to a stranger, someone who didn't care about the hurt they had caused. "I didn't think you'd be ready," I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Is that your excuse? You decided what was best for me without even asking me, without even giving me the chance to be part of the decision." Their eyes darted to the side, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't want you to get hurt. I thought it was better this way." Better. I could feel the anger boiling up inside me. It wasn't about what was better for me. It was about being included, about being treated with respect. But I wasn't going to get that from them, not anymore. They were trying to manipulate the situation, spinning it in a way that made it seem like they were doing me a favor. I stood there, feeling the weight of the lie hanging in the air between us. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just a bad decision made in the heat of the moment. This was a calculated move, a manipulation that had been months in the making. And here I was, standing face to face with the person I had trusted, and all I got was a justification that was as empty as their promises had once been full. I wanted to shout, to confront them with everything I had uncovered: the email, the lies, the manipulation, but a part of me held back. Was I ready for the truth? Was I ready to see the full extent of the betrayal that had been festering behind closed doors? As I walked away from the conversation, the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on my chest. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that everything I had believed in had been built on a lie. That trust, it was gone. And in its place, I was left with a gaping hole of disappointment and disbelief. But even after that confrontation, I couldn't escape the feeling that something else was going on. There was more to this than I could see, more than my mentor was letting on. The pieces didn't fit together. There were still too many unanswered questions, too many inconsistencies in their story. So, I dug deeper. I started going through old emails, messages, notes, anything that could shed light on the truth. And that's when I found it. It was an old draft, buried deep in my mentor's inbox, one they hadn't sent, but one they had clearly worked on. The subject line was simple: Project Shift, Need to Move Forward. I opened it and read the draft. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about the project, it was about me, about how I wasn't moving fast enough, how my ideas were stagnating, and how someone else was needed to take charge. It was a plan to cut me out completely, to leave me behind and move forward without me. The document ended with a note that read, "We need to make sure protagonist's name doesn't get in the way of progress." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I couldn't breathe. I had been replaced, pushed aside without even knowing it. The betrayal I had felt in the moment was nothing compared to the realization of what I had just uncovered. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't a phase. This was deliberate, and it was crushing. I felt the anger bubble up again, the need to confront my mentor surging within me, but I couldn't, at least not yet. The truth I had just uncovered was too raw, too painful. The lies, the manipulation, the decisions made behind my back, it was more than I could process in a single moment. I didn't know what to do with this new information. Should I confront them again? Should I expose everything I knew, lay it all out on the table? Or should I let it go and walk away, leaving the truth to fester in silence? I was torn. My mind kept replaying everything, trying to make sense of the destruction in front of me. What is the cost of knowing the truth? Would revealing it just make everything worse? Could I destroy everything I had worked for, everything I had trusted, by exposing the lies? I didn't know if I could go back to the way things were, if I could trust them again, even if I tried. The damage was done. The lies were out in the open, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. But even more than that, I wasn't sure if I could trust myself. Had I been blind to all of this? Had I let my own insecurities cloud my judgment? The questions spun in my mind, relentless. Was I willing to destroy everything I had built, to expose the truth, and lose what little I had left? Or should I walk away, let the truth remain buried, and try to find a way to move forward without confronting the wreckage. In the end, I knew one thing: the truth would never set me free. It would only destroy everything. The weight of what I had discovered crushed me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls around me were closing in. My thoughts felt scattered, each piece of the puzzle more disorienting than the last. I had seen the email, read the drafts, and uncovered the lies. But there was still a part of me, deep down, that didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept that the person who had shaped my career, who had once been my guide, could so easily discard me. I needed to do something. I needed to take control. But with every step I took, the emotional weight grew heavier. Confronting my mentor again felt like a battle I wasn't ready to fight. The truth was too painful, and revealing it, exposing it, felt like it would destroy everything I had worked for. What would I have left if I pulled back the curtain? A shattered relationship, a career tainted by betrayal, and a future that seemed uncertain. That I spent days in this limbo, torn between the truth I had uncovered and the loyalty I still felt. The mentor who had once been my rock was now the source of my greatest pain. And yet, there was a part of me that still wanted to believe in them. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, to ignore the harsh reality of what I had found. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, hoping that focusing on something else would push the truth aside, at least for a little while. But every time I sat down to make progress, the betrayal loomed over me like a dark cloud. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to outrun. One evening, after yet another long day spent trying to drown out the noise in my head, I found myself back at my mentor's office. The need for closure had become an insistent force, driving me forward. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had to confront them again, ask the questions that had been eating away at me. As I stood outside their office, my hand hovering over the door handle, I could feel the fear building in my chest. What would I do if they denied everything? What if they tried to turn the tables and make me feel like the problem? I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But I had no choice. I had to know. I opened the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of coffee and paperwork filling the air. My mentor was sitting behind their desk, as usual, but this time, something felt different. They didn't look up immediately. It was as if they were waiting for me to speak first, almost like they knew what was coming. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice unsteady. They looked up at me, their eyes briefly flicking over the papers on their desk before meeting mine. "Of course," they replied. "What's on your mind?" I felt a tightness in my chest, but I pressed on. "I've been thinking about everything. The project, the plans, the email, and how you've been acting lately. I need to understand. What's going on? Why didn't you involve me in the decision? Why was I excluded?" Their face hardened, but they didn't answer right away. The silence between us stretched, thick with tension. Finally, they spoke, their tone calm, controlled. "I told you, I didn't think you were ready for the next step. You were moving too slowly. We needed to make decisions quickly, and I made the call. I didn't want to make you feel bad, but I thought it was the best choice." Their words were calculated. They were carefully chosen, meant to deflect the truth, to make it seem like they were doing me a favor. But I wasn't fooled. I had already seen through the cracks, and no amount of manipulation could hide the reality that was staring me in the face. "You didn't think I was ready," I repeated, my voice shaky. "Is that it? You made decisions without asking me, without even telling me what was going on. You just left me in the dark." They didn't flinch. They didn't apologize. They simply leaned back in their chair, crossing their arms over their chest, as if they had made a perfectly reasonable decision. "You'll get another chance. You just need to trust the process. Trust the process." The words echoed in my head, but they felt hollow. My mentor's explanation didn't make sense anymore. The person I had trusted for so long, the one I had relied on to guide me, was now the one keeping me in the dark, pulling strings behind the scenes. I realized then that nothing would change. Nothing would ever be the same. I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. The person who had shaped my career, who had been my mentor, had just shown me who they really were, and it wasn't someone I could trust anymore. I turned and walked out of their office, my mind reeling. I had the answers I needed, but they only made the situation worse. The truth was ugly, and it left me with a bitter taste in my mouth. I had been betrayed by the one person I thought I could count on, and now, everything I had worked for, everything I had built on that trust, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. As I sat in my office, alone with my thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder what now? What was the cost of knowing the truth? What would happen if I exposed it? Could I face the consequences of tearing down everything I had built with my mentor? Could I risk everything for the sake of my own integrity? I wasn't sure I was ready to lose everything, but the cost of living with this lie, the cost of ignoring the truth, felt far worse. The anger, the disappointment, the pain of knowing that I had been manipulated was too much to carry. The truth had been unveiled, but it had come at a price. I was left with nothing but the pieces of a broken relationship, a career built on lies, and the painful realization that sometimes knowing the truth doesn't set you free. It just leaves you with a mess that's impossible to clean up. Chapter 4. The truth was no longer something I could ignore, no longer something I could pretend wasn't happening. Every shred of evidence, every moment I had tried to push aside, had now collided with reality in a way that left no room for doubt. My mentor had betrayed me. The lies I had been fed, the manipulations I had been blind to, they all came crashing down on me in one swift, brutal moment. I had always believed that trust was sacred. It was the foundation upon which I built everything: my career, my relationships, my sense of self. And now, with each new revelation, I realized that the person I had trusted most had been the one to shatter that foundation. The more I uncovered, the more the truth became undeniable. But the question remained: could I still maintain my integrity after everything had been laid bare? Could I stand tall, knowing that I had been deceived, manipulated, and betrayed by the one person I had relied on more than anyone else? I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. The time had come to confront my mentor, to finally face the truth head-on, no matter how painful it was. But as I prepared myself for the confrontation, a wave of fear gripped me. The thought of exposing everything, of tearing down the last thread of trust we had, was almost too much to bear. I couldn't avoid it any longer. The emotional weight of everything I had learned, everything I had uncovered, hung heavy in my chest. I had to confront them. But could I? Could I confront the person who had guided me, shaped me, only to reveal themselves as someone who had never truly had my best interests at heart? I walked into their office, the place where I had once felt safe, where I had come for guidance and reassurance, the place where I had always felt like I belonged. But now, it felt different. It felt cold, like a stage set for a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. They looked up from their desk as I entered, their expression unreadable. The same mentor I had known for years, but now, something about them felt distant, unfamiliar. "What is it?" they asked, their voice calm, almost detached. I could feel my heart racing, my palms sweating, but I couldn't back down now. "I had to know the truth. I know what you've been doing," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "I know about the plans you've made without me, the lies you've told, the decisions you've made behind my back." They didn't flinch. Their gaze remained locked on mine, but it was colder than I had ever seen. For a moment, there was silence, heavy, thick silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, they spoke. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. I couldn't let them brush this off. I couldn't let them manipulate me anymore. I had seen enough. I had uncovered enough. The emails, the plans, the decisions you made about my future without ever consulting me. You cut me out. You replaced me. And you never even gave me a chance to be part of it. The words spilled out, each one more painful than the last. "You've been lying to me this whole time. I trusted you. I trusted you with everything. And this is what you've done." For a moment, they didn't speak, but I could see the change. In their eyes, the cold mask they had worn was cracking. The truth was out, and they could no longer hide behind the veil of indifference. But instead of owning up to their actions, they doubled down. "You don't understand," they said, their voice laced with a mixture of frustration and defensiveness. "I was doing what was best for you, what was best for us. You were too focused on the wrong things. You didn't see the bigger picture." It felt like a slap in the face. I had trusted this person more than anyone else, and now they were telling me that my feelings, my trust, didn't matter, that it was all part of some grand plan that I wasn't supposed to understand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear into them, to force them to admit what they had done. But something inside me, something I couldn't quite explain, held me back. I wasn't sure if I was ready to tear down the last remnants of this relationship. Could I expose them for the betrayal they had committed? Could I bring myself to destroy everything, knowing that once the truth was out, there would be no going back? I stood there, torn. My mind was screaming for me to confront them, to demand the truth, to expose the lies for what they were. But my heart was heavy with the weight of everything I had worked for. Could I really destroy the foundation of everything I had built? Would exposing the truth ruin me? Would it ruin them? The silence between us grew thick. The only sound was the pounding of my own heart, the rush of emotions building up inside me. I knew I couldn't keep living with this doubt, with this lingering sense of betrayal. But the cost of confronting it head-on felt unbearable. "I trusted you," I said, softly, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I was feeling. "And you used that trust against me." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in their eyes. It was brief flickers of guilt, of regret, maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it came. They leaned forward in their chair, their posture defensive. "You think this is easy for me?" they asked, their voice rising. "You think I wanted to hurt you? Everything I did for the greater good. I did it for us." For a moment, I almost believed them. The words they said sounded so convincing, so practiced. But then, I remembered the emails, the lies, the decisions made behind my back. This wasn't for the greater good. This wasn't for us. This was for them. And they were trying to make me believe it was all part of some greater plan. I knew then that I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of this betrayal. I couldn't let this person control me anymore. Couldn't let them manipulate me into thinking that they had the right to make decisions for me. The truth was clear. The betrayal was undeniable. The relationship that had once been built on trust was now a house of lies. And it was time for me to decide, would I continue to cling to the remnants of that trust? Or would I find the strength to walk away, to confront the truth, and face the painful reality of what had happened? Chapter 4. The moment hung in the air between us. I stood there, trembling not with fear, but with the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal had been laid bare. There was no more room for excuses, no more hiding behind words that didn't ring true. I couldn't escape the thought that had been plaguing me since the first moment. I suspected something was wrong. Can I still maintain my integrity after this betrayal? The mentor who had been my guide, the person who had shaped my life in ways I could never fully articulate, was now the source of my greatest pain. How could I reconcile my loyalty to them with the truth of what they had done? How could I even look at them without seeing the lies, the manipulations, and the cold decisions they had made at my expense? I wanted to confront them, to lay everything bare, but there was something in me that held back. Was I strong enough to face the consequences of exposing the truth? If I revealed everything, would I destroy not only my mentor's career but mine as well? Could I go on after ripping away the last thread of trust that had once held us together? The silence stretched between us, unbearable in its intensity. Every part of me wanted to scream, to shout at them for everything they had done, but I couldn't, not yet. I wasn't sure what the right answer was anymore. Was the truth worth the cost? Was confronting them and exposing the lies worth the destruction it might bring? And then, in that moment, a thought hit me harder than any of the words that had been exchanged. What if I didn't confront them? What if I just walked away? Would that be easier? Would ignoring the betrayal, pretending like nothing had changed, give me some peace? I shook my head, as if trying to dismiss the thought, but it lingered. The truth was like a bomb, ready to explode. But I was too terrified to pull the trigger. As I looked at them, the person who had once been my rock, my mentor, the one I trusted more than anyone, I realized something. This person, this mentor who had shaped me, had never really seen me not the way I had thought. They had used me, manipulated my trust to further their own interests, and I had allowed it. I had been blind to the truth for so long. But the truth had a cost. It always did. I thought back to everything I had learned from them, the lessons, the guidance, the advice. Was it all a lie? Had every decision I made, every step I took, been influenced by someone who never truly had my best interests at heart? Or had I simply allowed myself to believe in them, to believe that they cared, when all along they had been using me as a means to their own end? I couldn't keep living like this. The doubt, the confusion, it was suffocating. And I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. And that truth, no matter how painful it was, had to be faced. With a deep breath, I looked my mentor in the eye, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in their mask, just as I had once seen in my own. "You lied to me," I said, the words more powerful than I expected. "You manipulated me, and you did it all to protect your own interests, not mine." They didn't flinch. Instead, they stared at me, their expression cold, almost calculating. I did what I had to do. "You're not the only one with a vision for the future." But I wasn't buying it anymore. The words fell flat, empty. They didn't mean anything. They didn't change the fact that they had deceived me. They didn't change the fact that everything I had built with them was built on lies. I had spent so much time questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Was I just being too sensitive? But no, I wasn't. This wasn't just about my feelings. This was about a betrayal that cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. This was about my trust being destroyed by the one person I had thought I could count on. I took a step back, my voice steady, but filled with the raw emotion of everything I had been holding in. "You know what? I trusted you, I believed in you, and this is how you repay me. By destroying everything we've built, by making decisions about my life, without even considering what I wanted." They didn't respond. The silence between us grew thick, and in that moment, I realized something else. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. What I needed was to reclaim my power, to take control of my life and my future, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. For a long time, I had relied on my mentor, trusted them implicitly. I had built my career, my confidence, my future, on the belief that they were guiding me. But now, I understood. I had to be my own guide. I had to trust myself. I couldn't rely on someone else to shape my destiny, especially not someone who had used me for their own gain. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know if I could completely walk away from this, or if I would have to find a way to rebuild everything from scratch. But what I did know was this: I had the strength to face whatever came next. The betrayal had been revealed. The truth had come out. And now, I had a choice. I could confront my mentor, expose the lies, and walk away. Or I could accept it, live with the knowledge that the person I had trusted had broken me, and somehow find a way to move forward. But as I stood there, feeling the weight of everything I had just said, I knew what I had to do. I was done pretending. I was done letting someone else control my life. It was time to take back my power. Chapter 5: Resolution and Reflection. The days after everything had been revealed were filled with a quiet kind of turmoil. I didn't know where I stood anymore. My mentor's betrayal had changed me, changed everything. The certainty I had once felt was now replaced with doubt, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. The trust that had been the foundation of our relationship had crumbled, leaving behind a trail of destruction that I wasn't sure I could navigate. I thought back to the day I had first started trusting them, how easy it had been, how natural. I had believed in them with everything I had. They had been the one person I could count on, the one person who knew me better than anyone else. And now, it felt as if that trust had been a lie, built on a foundation of deceit. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the fact that I had been blind to it for so long. I had trusted someone who had used that trust against me, and as I sat with that knowledge, I couldn't help but ask myself, what was the true cost of betrayal? What had I lost in all of this? Was it just the relationship with my mentor, or was it something deeper, something about the very core of who I was? Trust had always been the foundation of my identity, whether in my professional life, in my personal relationships, or in the way I saw myself as a leader. And now, that foundation had been shattered. The person I had looked up to had broken me in ways I didn't even fully understand. In the aftermath, I found myself questioning everything. Could I trust anyone again? Would I ever be able to look at a mentor, a leader, or a friend the same way? And more importantly, could I trust myself? If I had missed the signs of betrayal, if I had been blind to the manipulation for so long, what else was I capable of missing? The journey to uncover the truth had been difficult, but it didn't stop once the truth was exposed. It didn't stop when I had confronted my mentor and heard the hollow justifications for their actions. The real work, the real challenge began. After the confrontation, after the emotional weight of the betrayal had been laid bare, I had spent so much time trying to understand why my mentor had done what they did. I had tried to rationalize it, to make sense of it, but the truth was that there was no excuse for betrayal, no explanation that could ever make it okay. In the days that followed, I began to reflect on the lessons I had learned, not from the betrayal itself, but from the journey I had been forced to take. The truth had come at a great cost, but it had also come with a lesson. Betrayal had forced me to see my own weaknesses, my own vulnerabilities. It had forced me to confront the parts of myself I had been too afraid to look at, the parts of me that still believed in other people's goodness, even when it was no longer deserved. And in that confrontation, I realized something important. Betrayal is not the end of the road. It's a turning point. Betrayal doesn't define us. It's painful. Yes, it's devastating. Absolutely. But it's not the end of the story. The end comes when we decide that the betrayal will control us, when we allow it to define who we are, when we let it strip us of our ability to trust and to lead. But there is another way forward. I knew now that my growth as a leader, as a person, would not come from running away from the pain or pretending that the betrayal hadn't happened. It would come from choosing to move forward, to learn from it, and to rebuild not the relationship with my mentor, but my relationship with myself. That was the key. The foundation I had built my life on was no longer viable, but that didn't mean I had to build on a lie. I could rebuild it on something stronger, something unshakable: integrity, vulnerability, authenticity. But rebuilding was not an easy task. The emotional scars of betrayal run deep. The trust that had been broken wasn't something that could be restored overnight. And it wasn't just about my mentor's betrayal. It was about the way I had allowed that betrayal to shape my identity, to shape the way I saw myself and my future. I had to learn to trust again, but not in the way I had before. I couldn't trust blindly. I couldn't give my heart away to people who hadn't earned it, but I could trust myself. I could trust my own judgment, my own instincts. I could trust that I had the strength to face whatever came next, no matter how painful or difficult it might be. I had learned to embrace vulnerability not as a weakness, but as a tool for growth. In that vulnerability, I had found strength. In confronting the pain of betrayal, I had found my true power. And as I looked ahead, I realized something else. The betrayal wasn't just a setback. It was a catalyst for change. It forced me to face my own limits, my own fears, and my own capacity for growth. And in doing so, I had become a stronger, more resilient person than I had ever been before. I had learned to lead, not from a place of fear or insecurity, but from a place of honesty and authenticity. The cost of betrayal was high, but the lessons it had taught me were invaluable. And in the end, I knew that the real power wasn't in holding on to the past or in seeking revenge. The real power lay in moving forward, in trusting myself, and in using the pain of betrayal to fuel my growth. I've learned that betrayal is not a roadblock, but a stepping stone. It is a painful, ugly truth, but it also holds the potential for transformation. It forces us to confront what we didn't want to see, to face the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. But in doing so, we uncover strength we didn't know we had. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to reflect on the choice that lay before me. The anger and confusion I had felt in the aftermath of betrayal were still there, but they were no longer all-consuming. Instead, they had been replaced with a deeper understanding of myself and the situation I had found myself in. I didn't have all the answers. I still didn't know how to rebuild the relationships I had lost, or if I even should. The truth was painful, and the consequences of facing it were far-reaching. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let this betrayal be the end of my story. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of what had happened felt too much to bear. I found myself staring into the mirror, questioning everything. Who am I without my mentor? Who am I without the trust I built my career on? But in those quiet moments of self-reflection, I also found something else. I found the strength to move forward. I realized that I didn't need someone else's approval to be enough. I didn't need validation from a mentor who had failed me. I didn't need to keep living in the shadow of the betrayal. What I needed was to reclaim my own power, to trust myself, to trust my instincts, and to rebuild on my own terms. Trust is a fragile thing. It takes time to build, but once broken, it can feel impossible to repair. But what I've learned is that trust isn't just something we place in others. It's something we have to place in ourselves first. And that, in the end, is the hardest part. It's easier to put our faith in others, to rely on someone else to guide us. But when that trust is betrayed, it forces us to look inward, to find strength within ourselves that we didn't know was there. As painful as this experience has been, I now know that it has shaped me into someone stronger, someone more resilient, I'm not the same person I was when I first started this journey. I've grown, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of it. The person I was before would have run from the truth, would have let the pain consume me. But the person I am now knows that the only way forward is to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. I've learned that true leadership begins with self-trust. It's about having the courage to face the difficult truths, even when they shake the very foundation of who you are. It's about embracing vulnerability, knowing that the pain of betrayal doesn't have to define your future. You can choose to move forward, to learn from the past, and to rebuild stronger than before. And that's where the real work begins. Betrayal teaches us something powerful. We cannot change others, but we can change ourselves. We can choose how we respond, how we heal, and how we grow. We don't have to be defined by the actions of others. We don't have to let someone else's choices dictate our future. The real strength lies in our ability to move forward, to rebuild, and to trust again. So, I ask you, what will you do with the lessons betrayal has taught you? How will you rebuild the trust that has been broken in your life? Will you let it define you, or will you use it as a stepping stone toward something greater? I can't say that I've found all the answers. Healing isn't a straight line, and there are still days when the wounds feel fresh, when the memories of betrayal resurface with all their sharp edges. But I know this: the path to healing, to personal growth, and to true leadership starts with embracing vulnerability. In the face of betrayal, in the face of loss, we have a choice. We can choose to shut down, to close ourselves off from others, to live in the shadows of our pain. Or we can choose to trust again, to trust ourselves, to trust the process, and to trust that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to heal, to grow, and to move forward. I leave you with this. Think about your own life. Think about the times trust has been broken, when you've been let down, or when you've been hurt. What have you learned from those experiences? How have you used them to grow? Remember, vulnerability is not a weakness. It's the key to connection, to leadership, and to growth. It's what allows us to move forward after betrayal, after loss. It's what gives us the strength to rebuild, to trust again, and to lead with authenticity and integrity. So, what will you do? Will you let betrayal define you? Or will you choose to use it as the catalyst for your own transformation? The choice is yours.